Hi everyone. Hope you all are doing good. So, today I'll be talking about this very interesting topic that is called as writing powerful pen test reports. So, let's just quickly jump into it. All right. So, before actually starting with these slides, I would quickly like to introduce myself. My name is Abhinav Khanna, and I'm currently working as an application security engineer, if not so secure. Apart from that, I'm also actively involved in bug bounties as well, and I'm a member of Synaptic team. Now, let's just jump to the main question. That is, what is a pen test report? Pen test report can be considered as a final deliverable of the entire engagement, which includes all the vulnerabilities found on the agreed scope. While the main purpose of the pen test report is to, craft a report in such a way that the vulnerabilities identified is shown, it's not only limited to that. Uh, we need to take care of a lot of other things like the summaries or the graphs or methodology, things like that, because we have a vast audience that we need to take care of. So this report actually involves a lot of other things as well. So let's try to understand why. Let's see who is going to read our report. It can be CISOs, project managers, the dev team, application owners, audit team, co-workers, clients, internal security team, or interns. Now, if we talk about CISOs, they are the people who are not going to dig deep into the report, but might be interested into the tables or the scan one graph, the scan two graphs, or maybe they want to see the number of high vulnerabilities or critical vulnerabilities. So we need to take care that what the CISO wants to see in the report is there. Project managers. So project managers might actually have to go through the entire report, but they might not be technical enough to understand what is there in the report. So while we are crafting the report, we need to take care that we are writing in such a way that these guys can also understand the report, the dev team. So the main target audience is the dev team, because at the end of the day, they are going to look at the report, the vulnerabilities, and the recommendations, and they are going to work on it. So they obviously we have to write in such a way that those guys are understanding. So I was at the audit team. So third party audit teams are equally important because I recently went through a situation where just a minute. Yep. Where the third party audit team asked us that why this vulnerability is marked as fixed while it is open on the scan1 URL. So some mishappening happened in the entire report, and that is how we got to know that third party teams are also interested in our reports. So we need to take care of that as well. Then comes the co-workers. So your co-workers might be interested to know what vulnerability have you found out, how you found out, how you're creating the reports. So the people who are working with you are equally important when you're creating the reports because they can be used as a future reference. Then comes the client's internal security team, and those guys might also be interested in your report to understand what you've identified because they are the ones who might replicate that finding. Then comes the interns. So interns might not be knowing what exactly a report is or how to exploit a vulnerability, but they might use your report as a reference to understand how to create a report, to see how a scenario can be exploited, and again to use as a template or a future reference. So these are some people or the potential target audience that we need to take care of while we are crafting the report. Now, let's move ahead. Okay, so let's see what good report writing can lead to. The first is client appreciation. Well, a well-made report can really be good for your confidence and your organization's confidence. Because believe me, client appreciation in any form, be it vulnerability identification, report writing, is always a great booster to your motivation and makes you perform even well. So that is the utmost priority, getting the client's appreciation, client retention. So the reason I mentioned is this because we retained a client because of the kind of report we were sharing them, the structure of the report. There were other consultancies that were working on that same project, but we were able to retain it. Why? Because our reporting was good. It was better than others. Effective communication. See, the main point of the report is that you are trying to convey the story of how you found a vulnerability or how you exploit a vulnerability. And if you're not communicating it effectively, then there's no point of writing the report. So that again is an important point to consider while you're creating the report. Communication. Repository, just like I mentioned before, your report can be used as a reference, can be used as a template for future reference. Suppose you've created a very good XSS report or very good SQL injections POC, and that can be used in the future. So that is again a good plus point for you. Okay. New clients. Again, this I have mentioned this because a few years back we were working on a POC to get a client on board and we missed out on a few findings. But still, we were able to back that project because our reporting was better than the other teams. So here we were able to back a project because of our reporting skills and not on the vulnerability identification. Again, a plus point. Job opportunities. So again, the reason for mentioning this is because recently one of my friends got a job opportunity from one of their clients because of her reporting skills. She was a good pen tester, but an even good report writer. And that is how she landed the job in a better place. So that is also a point to consider. So while we have seen a few points that can be good for a good report writing, let's see what a not so good writing can lead you to. Report rewriting. Your client might come back to you and say that, hey, we want you to edit this or we want you to modify this, to delete this. This is time consuming and this may not leave a good impression of you and your organization if the client comes back to you again and again. Second, loss of revenue. The client might continue to, might not continue with their organization if the report does not meet the standards. So at one place we saw that we are increasing the revenue by getting new clients on board and by retaining the client. There are organizations who are going to lose the client as well, and which would effectively lead to loss of revenue. So that's a big point to consider. Escalations. Escalations can come in any form, be it you have missed the vulnerability or any other thing. But if the escalation comes for your report writing, believe me, you're going in the wrong direction because vulnerability identification can still be a technical thing, but report writing is not so technical. And chances of escalations for this is low. But if you're getting the escalation for report writing, believe me, you're heading into the wrong direction. Lack of trust. Your client or your colleagues might stop reaching out to you for any suggestions for report writing. And that is again a very critical point to consider for your own personal growth because it is going to lead you to demotivation. Self-doubt. All these points are interconnected. Self-doubt, report, rewriting, and lack of trust. All these points are interconnected. It is going to lead you to demotivation if you are, facing all this. And because of this, there is going to be miscommunication. The entire point of the report writing is that you are conveying your story to the reader properly. And if you're not doing that, then there is a huge miscommunication happening and no point of writing the report. So whether they are the good points or the bad points, they all are interrelated to each other and you need to work on them. All right. So let's move on. Now let's look at some of the things that can be included in the report. Let's start with a short description about the application use. While this is optional, I would generally recommend to add this in your report because it is going to leave a good impression about you and your organization that you guys have put in the effort to understand the application and what the application really does. Along with it, you can mention the walkthrough date in case it was provided. Again, it's optional. The reason I have mentioned it here is because instead of digging deep into the emails to find out the walkthrough date, you can add this little thing in the report itself because we are already creating such a detailed document. A one-liner is not going to create much messier. Then production URLs. So if you're working on a staging environment or a UAT environment, do mention the production environment details as well. URLs given for testing. Again, UAT environment or staging environment, whatever it is, do mention the URL in the report. And the rescan URL as well. The reason mentioned here is that I faced an incident in my career where the vulnerability was fixed on the rescan URL, but was open on the URL given for scan one because the rescan URL and the first scan URL were both different. So to avoid that confusion, mention the URL that is given to you each time for the testing. Deliverable version. I guess that's it given. I'm not going to go deep into it. Every time you're releasing a report to the client, you need to write the versions as version 1, version 2, or V1 or V2, whatever way your company follows. Pentester or consultant's name. Again, that's a given, and I'm not going to go much into it. Test credentials. So, if you're using a mobile number or a email or a username, you can and you should mention it in the report, but you should not include the password. The reason, so for example, if an intern is going through a report and sees the username and password, he might want to access the application using those credentials and might hamper the application. So to avoid that situation, do not include the password. The next three things I guess are given, and you guys must be following it already, are the company's logo, the client's logo, and your methodology followed. All right, let's move on. If you're working on an Android application, do try to mention the hash of the application, be it Android or iOS. Reason, because the application versions keep getting updated on the Play Store and App Store. To keep the exact version locked, you can take a hash using MobSR, and the hash is going to include MD5 details, SH1 details, SH256 details. Basically, it is a very good way to present the exact version that you're working on. So if you're working on mobile apps, this can definitely be considered. But if you want to keep it simple, you can just go to the App Store or Play Store and just highlight the version that you're working on. All right. Now, let's have a look at what CISOs are interested in, or the board of director people are interested in. The graphs, scan one graph. For example, if you're working on the application for the first time, this is what a graph is going to look like. For example, there are 4 vulnerabilities reported in high, 5 in medium, 7 in low, 1 in info. So this is what a graph is going to look like. The CISO is going to say that, okay, these are the 4 vulnerabilities, and he might or might not go through these POC of these findings. This comparison graph. Now, this becomes a very crucial figure when it comes to rescans, because the CISOs or the board of directors are going to look at what work has been done by their team in fixing these findings. For example, here 2 findings are fixed, 2 are not fixed. In medium as well. So he might want to see what is the count that is fixed, what are the findings that are still open, what are the findings that are closed, or things that need to be accepted by his team as a risk. So all these things, these graphs are going to be very helpful for CISOs. Okay. Yep. So before we move ahead, just a point that we should consider report writing as part of our job and not an extra load. Because it is a part of the engagement, we need to write the report. We should not consider it extra burden. The reason I am mentioning this is because I have seen people who consider this an extra load. Ideally, they should not. So if you're talking to someone about pen testing, do mention that all these steps, recon, gathering, exploitation, post-exploitation, report writing is equally important, and equal emphasis is should be given to it as well. Okay. Now let's look at the roadmap to create your proof of concept. And it would involve 6 to 7 steps, starting from the vulnerability name, then severity, affected URL parameters, description of the impact, steps to reproduce the vulnerabilities, then comes the remediation, and the final will be references. Now, let's look at each point one by one. Let's start with the vulnerability name color coding. I guess that's a given. Everywhere you are using some certain colors for writing the vulnerabilities in your report. But what needs to be taken care of is that for project A, if you are using 3 or 4 colors for high, medium, low, keep the same for project B as well. Use the same colors, same color coding for all the projects. Keep it uniform. Do not change if you are doing so. Okay. Now, when it comes to description and impact, keep in mind that you do not copy paste the description and impacts from resources like CodeSwagger, Equalytics, NetSparkle, and things like that. OWASP. The reason is that because, for example, you copy it from somewhere, some of the blogs, and there is something wrong written. So that wrong thing is going to be there in your report as well. And the client might come back to you and say that if these things are copy pasted, what work have you done in the report? To avoid that situation, try to understand the vulnerability first and write your own description and impact afterwards. Try to craft your own description. Yep. Use simpler words instead of technical jargons. So, because we need to take care of the non-technical audience as well, we need to use simpler words so that the report is understood by them as well. Do not create too lengthy descriptions and impact. We are trying to tell a story of how we exploited a vulnerability, how we found a vulnerability. And if we are writing it too long, the person who is reading is going to get bored and might not be interested in reading the report. So we need to take care that things are not too lengthy in our report. Okay, let's move ahead and understand the steps to reproduce the vulnerabilities. Now, as I previously mentioned, do not keep it too technical because there are going to be non-technical people involved in the report reading process and you need to take care of them as well. So let's keep it as simple as possible. Highlight the affected parameter in the screenshot. But we are going to see it further. We need to keep in mind that we are highlighting the exact parameters to minimize the developer's effort to find out the vulnerable parameter. So that is our job to highlight the affected part so that they don't have to search for that vulnerable parameter. Do not misspell words. I've given you an example as well that if you want to write custom, but you wrote costume itself. These are two similar words, but they both have very different meaning. And I'll show you why and how I am going to use it. The next is mention the exact parameter that is affected. If it's first name with N capital in the request, write it that way only. Do not use your own words or do not use all small case or all uppercase. Try to write the exact word that is there in the request itself. It's jQuery with Q capital and not all small case or large case. So take care of that as well. Do not write unnecessary steps if they're not required. If a vulnerability of low or informational severity can be explained in a single step or 2 steps, there's no need to write 4 or 5 steps to it. You are unnecessarily killing your time and you are going to kill the reader's time as well by doing so. Let's understand all these points in here. So just like I mentioned previously, highlight the affected parameter. We have highlighted the search for parameter here, which is going to make the developers work easier that, okay, this is the parameter that he's going to work. And the parameter is search for with the F capital. We need to take care of it. It's not simply search for all small case. So this is something that you need to take care of. Okay. So we need to take care of spellings as well. For example, this is a vulnerability called improper error handling. So one of my teammates actually wanted to write that the application does not handle the error properly try to use custom error page. But what he wrote is try to use costume error page. Well, it's actually it's funny, but when it comes from client that you have written this, it actually leaves you in an embarrassing situation. So understand the meaning of the words, and if you're not sure, you can always Google it. So try to take care of the words that you are entering in your report here as well. So you can see that this jQuery with Q capital and jQuery UI is a different thing. So try to mention both separately. They are not fun. AngularJS is JS capital, not all small cases or upper cases. These little things, these things show the client or the person reading it that you are trying to create a near to perfect report. The last point, what we said, that do not write unnecessary steps. This is a vulnerability called missing HTTP headers. And we can write it as a team noticed that the HTTP security headers are not implemented. That's it. It can work in a single step. Now, this is a completely wrong way to report the same vulnerability. Open the application, go to sign up page, reload the page, go to burp, send the request to repeater, notice that headers are not there. These steps are unnecessary and are not required. You can simply do it in a single step. Now, let's move ahead and discuss what needs to be there in the remediation. The first part is again what I mentioned in description and impact, that do not copy paste remediation from anywhere. If you're copying the remediation from online resources, the dev team might come back to you and say that, hey, we have implemented these fixes, but the vulnerability is still open. How is it possible? To avoid that situation, try to write your own recommendation and try to be precise about it. I mean, try to find the exact recommendation of the vulnerability. If you're not able to write the exact remediation, try to give the journal recommendation and do mention to the dev that these are the journal recommendations, not the exact ones, to avoid the confusion or conflict. Also remember that a recommendation that worked for you in a project A would not work in project B. I mean, it can work, but not sure. I mean, not definitely. So you need to take care of it. These things: remediation, description, impact should not be copied from anywhere. They should come in your own language, because this is what the client is going to think then, uh, that the team actually understands the vulnerability, they actually understand the impact, and that is why they are able to write it in their own language. Now, when it comes to references, we can use references from OWASP, we can use references from CW links, or we can use some from any trusted resources, things like Portswigger and NetSpark. We can use them here. The reason that I mentioned previously that we should avoid Portswigger's definitions in our description as well, because we would be giving the references here. And again, if the reading team is going to go through the references as well, they might come back again and say, you have copy pasted from Portugal or from OWASP. What work have you done or what effort have you put in? So you need to take care of it. References that should not be included is irrelevant links or any YouTube links or competition companies. So when it comes to YouTube links, some companies might be having a policy where YouTube is not accessible. In that situation, these links become completely irrelevant. To avoid that situation, do not include videos links in the first place. Okay. Now let's try to see a few tips that can be used to improve the report writing. The first is peer review. So whenever you have written a report, ask a colleague to read the report. By doing so, they might be able to help you or guide you that this thing can be improved or you can write this here. Basically, they are giving you feedback on your report. And believe me, it's a very good way to improve your report writing. I used to do it during my initial days, and it's a really good technique to follow. Read out loud. I still do it today, in fact. Reading out loud makes you understand that the report is good or not. If you're reading it to yourself, and you're able to understand, you're confident enough that the other person would also understand. But if you're not confident that you are not able to understand, how can the other person would understand? So this should be a definitely go-to step when you are writing a report. Read reports by others, just like I mentioned previously. Reading reports by others can be used as a template or understand scenarios. It can also be used uh, as a reference to how can you improve your own writing, or where is it that you need to improve on, or you can see that you're actually working better than the other person. So this is again a good method to follow. Use of grammar checkers or sentence checkers. While you should not rely on them, but once in a while it is okay to go to these checkers and see that the sentence formation, your sentences are accurate. This can be really helpful to reduce the amount of time that you are spending on your report. Effective training. This is a very important point for organizations. So organizations are going to give you subscription for platforms like Pentester Academy or Hack the Box or Pentester Lab, things like that, where you can improve your hacking skills. But I've never seen a company giving training for report writing. And this needs to be taken care of because companies need to realize that report writing is a part of the pen testing engagement and it is an important part, especially for the people who are entering into the corporate world or entering into the security team. Training should be provided to them, definitely provided to them, because if training is not there, they are going to have a hard time understanding the entire process. Adequate time for report. This is also a very important time. Uh, if adequate time is not given to you for reports, mistakes are going to happen. You have been given 4 to 5 days for identifying vulnerabilities, but you have only been given half a day to write the report. Believe me, it is not going to work. You are going to make a lot of mistakes in the report. A good report writing is easily going to take 2 to 3 days. Adequate timing should be given to you, and your organization needs to realize it, that you have given sufficient time for pen testing. You need to give sufficient time to report writing as well. By giving you only half a day or 1 a day is not going to improve your report writing at all. So for the last 2 points, definitely for the companies, and the others can be used by individuals also. At last, I would say that write like it's a job. Do not think that this is a burden that has been put on you. It is a part of your daily job and you need to be good at it. If not good, you need to be decent enough to craft a report. Yep. So that was it. Uh, any questions that you guys have, I'll be stopping my screen sharing for a while. But if any questions that you guys have, I'll be happy to take.